Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I moved to this condo building about 2 years ago when I finally landed a decent job at a marketing firm downtown. The rent wasn't cheap, but the location was perfect for my commute, and I was tired of living with 3 roommates who never cleaned up after themselves. The building had this great perk where you could rent a reserved parking space for an extra $100 a month. In a city where street parking is basically a blood sport, that $100 felt like the best money I'd ever spent. My neighbor across the hall seemed like a pretty normal guy when I first moved in. He was quiet, kept to himself, and we'd exchange polite nods in the hallway. He had this beat-up sedan that he always parked in one of the regular spots near the back of the lot. Everything was peaceful for about a year and a half. Then he started dating this woman who lived on the 3rd floor. I didn't think much of it at first. Good for him, right? But his new relationship came with some interesting side effects that would soon become my problem. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was running late for work, grabbed my coffee and keys, and headed down to the parking garage only to find some random car sitting in my clearly marked reserved space. The space has a bright yellow sign with my unit number on it, so there's no way to miss it. I stood there for a minute, genuinely confused, thinking maybe someone was just confused about which spot was theirs. I had to circle the block 3 times to find street parking and ended up being 20 minutes late to an important client meeting. But hey, mistakes happen, right? I figured whoever it was would realize their error and move. But the next morning there it was again. Same car, same spot. This time I was annoyed enough to do some detective work. I walked around the car and noticed it had a parking permit for our building, so it definitely belonged to someone who lived here. I decided to let building management handle it and left a note on the windshield explaining that this was a reserved space. The car was gone by the time I got home, so I thought the problem was solved. 3 days later, the mystery car was back. This time I was determined to figure out who was doing this. I waited around until I saw my neighbor coming out of the elevator with his girlfriend. They walked straight to the car in my spot, and everything clicked into place. I walked over before they could drive away. I politely told them that they were parked in my reserved space. My neighbor looked genuinely surprised and embarrassed. He apologized and said he had no idea it was reserved. I explained that all the spots with yellow signs were reserved and paid for monthly. He thanked me for letting him know and promised it wouldn't happen again. His girlfriend just rolled her eyes and got in the passenger seat without saying anything. I thought that was a little rude, but whatever. Problem solved, right? Nope. A week later, there's the car again. And again the following Tuesday, and then Thursday. At this point, I was starting to get really frustrated. I was paying good money for the convenience of having a guaranteed parking spot, and this guy was treating it like his personal space. Each time it happened, I had to waste time finding street parking and then walk several blocks back to my building. I decided to knock on his girlfriend's door since that's where he seemed to be spending most of his time. I apologized for bothering her and explained that her boyfriend had been parking in my reserved space again. I reminded him that it wasn't available for general use since I paid extra for it every month. She seemed surprised and asked if that was really my space. When I confirmed that I paid for it monthly, she turned around and called into the apartment. She told her boyfriend that he couldn't park in my spot anymore because I paid for it. He called back from inside, apologizing and saying he kept forgetting which spots were reserved. The thing is, there are only 6 reserved spaces in the entire parking garage, and they're all clearly marked. It's not exactly easy to forget, but it kept happening 4 more times over the next 2 weeks. Each time I had to hunt for street parking and walk back in whatever weather we were having. I was getting seriously fed up. I finally decided to report it to building management. I sent them photos of his car in my space with timestamps and explained that I'd already spoken to him multiple times about it. The property manager called me back the next day. He told me he'd spoken with the tenant in question, who assured him it wouldn't happen again. They'd issued a formal warning about parking violations. When I asked what would happen if it continued, he explained that repeated violations could result in fines or even lease termination in extreme cases. He said he was confident this warning would resolve the issue. It didn't resolve anything. 3 days later, his car was back in my spot. That's when I decided to get creative. My car is this ancient compact that I've had since college. It's small, beat up, and honestly, not worth much, but it gets me where I need to go. The one advantage of having such a tiny car became apparent when I realized I could park extremely close to other vehicles without any real issues. So the next time I found his car in my space, instead of going to find street parking, I parked my little car right next to his driver's side door. I'm talking inches apart, mirror to mirror. There was absolutely no way he was getting in on that side, and the passenger side was blocked by a concrete pillar. I made sure to leave just enough room on my passenger side so I could squeeze out, grab my stuff from the back seat, and head upstairs. Around 6 in the morning, I heard aggressive knocking on my door. I opened it to find my neighbor standing there, clearly frustrated. He asked if I was serious and complained that he couldn't get into his car. I looked at him with the most innocent expression I could manage and asked if that was his car, then mentioned that he was parked in my reserved space again. He acknowledged that he knew he was in my spot but insisted he couldn't get in because I'd parked way too close. I apologized but reminded him that he wasn't supposed to be parked there anyway since that was my spot that I paid for. He asked if I could just move my car so he could get to work. I told him I wasn't dressed yet and didn't need to move my car until later. I suggested he park in his own space next time. He stood there sputtering for a minute before stomping back to his girlfriend's apartment. I heard him on the phone with someone, probably calling for a ride to work. Good. Maybe now he'd think twice about taking my spot. But one lesson wasn't enough. He did it again 2 days later, and once again I parked my tiny car so close to his that a piece of paper couldn't fit between the mirrors. This time the knocking came at 5:30 in the morning. He complained that this was ridiculous and that he had an early meeting. I told him that he should have parked in a legal spot then. He apologized and said he'd just forgotten again, then asked if I could please move my car. I explained that I'd move it when I was ready to leave for work, which was usually around 8. He protested that was over 2 hours away. I agreed and suggested that maybe that would help him remember where he was supposed to park. The third time this happened, he brought his girlfriend with him. He accused me of harassment and said I couldn't just trap people's cars. I explained that I was parked in my own reserved space and that if his car wasn't illegally parked there, this wouldn't be an issue. His girlfriend called me petty and childish. I told her I was being practical. I explained that I'd tried asking nicely multiple times and it didn't work. I'd reported it to management and that didn't work either. This seemed to be the only thing that got their attention. She threatened to call the police. I encouraged her to go ahead, pointing out that I was legally parked in my own reserved space while her boyfriend was the one parked illegally. They didn't call the police. After the 4th morning of him banging on my door at dawn because he couldn't get into his car, something magical happened. He stopped parking in my space. Just like that, the problem vanished. No more mystery car in my spot. No more circling the block looking for parking. No more walking several blocks in the rain. I still make it a point to park close to his car whenever I see it, in the general parking area though. Not illegally close, just close enough to make it slightly inconvenient for him to get in and out. It's my little reminder that I haven't forgotten about his parking habits. The funny thing is, he avoids eye contact with me in the hallway now. His girlfriend gives me dirty looks whenever we pass each other, but I just smile and wave. I learned something important from this whole experience. Some people will keep pushing boundaries until they face real issues. Being polite and reasonable works great with considerate people, but entitled people seem to interpret politeness as weakness. I'm a nurse at the local hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that leave me exhausted. After dealing with difficult patients and their families all day, coming home to my guaranteed parking spot was always a relief. The complex has about 40 units, and I'd gotten to know most of my neighbors over the years. We generally looked out for each other and respected each other's property. That Tuesday started like any other. I just finished a brutal shift in the emergency department and was looking forward to collapsing on my couch. But when I pulled into the garage around 7 p.m., someone was parked in my spot. It wasn't uncommon for visitors to occasionally use the wrong spot by mistake, especially if they weren't familiar with the layout. Usually, a polite note solved the problem. I parked my car behind the offending vehicle, effectively blocking them in, and left a note on their windshield explaining that they were in my assigned spot and asking them to move. I also sent messages to the two neighbors whose cars I was now blocking, apologizing and explaining the situation. Both responded quickly, saying they understood and weren't planning to go anywhere that evening anyway. 4 hours later, someone was pounding on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a man I'd never seen before. He looked furious, his face red and his hands gesticulating wildly even before I opened the door. I opened it cautiously, my security camera positioned right above the door frame, recording everything. The man immediately started yelling at me, calling me an idiot for blocking in his father's car. I tried to explain that someone was parked in my assigned spot and that I had left a note asking them to move. He didn't care about my explanation and kept shouting that his father needed to leave and that I was harassing them. He threatened to call the police on me. I told him that was perfectly fine and that I'd be happy to explain to the officers that someone was parked in the spot I pay for every month. I closed the door and went back to my couch. The man continued yelling in the hallway for a few more minutes before walking off. I was perfectly fine with the police getting involved. I had my lease agreement, my parking spot purchase receipt, and now video evidence of this man's aggressive behavior. 15 minutes later, there was another knock. This time it was a woman, and her approach was completely different. She apologized for bothering me and politely asked if I could move my car so her father-in-law could leave. She explained that they really needed him to be able to go somewhere. Her tone was respectful, so I grabbed my keys and followed her down to the garage. The entire family was waiting there. The angry man from before, the woman, and an elderly man who I assumed was the grandfather. I tried to greet them pleasantly, but none of them responded to my friendly gesture. The grandfather got in his car and drove away, and I started backing into my spot. Finally, I thought this whole mess was over. But when I was about to complete the parking maneuver, the son jumped directly in front of my car. I got out and asked him what he was doing. He explained that I couldn't park there because his father was coming back after picking something up. He claimed his father was disabled and couldn't park in his regular spot because it was too narrow and he couldn't get out of his car properly. He said my spot was wider because of the maintenance room door next to it, making it perfect for his father. I could see his point. Being a good neighbor was important to me, and I didn't want to make things difficult for someone who genuinely needed accommodation. I suggested a compromise where I could park in his father's spot while the grandfather used mine during his visit. That way, everyone would be happy. But he rejected my reasonable solution, telling me that wouldn't work because he was planning to park his own car in his father's spot. When I asked where I was supposed to park then, he suggested I should just park on the street instead. The nearest street parking was a 10-minute walk away, and even then it wasn't guaranteed. I'd paid good money for this spot specifically to avoid that hassle. I pointed out that he could park on the street instead of me. Then he really lost it. He launched into this incredible speech about all the reasons why he couldn't possibly park on the street. He complained that he worked hard all day and was too tired to walk 10 minutes. He claimed he had family responsibilities that made the extra walking impossible. He insisted his father wasn't just disabled, but very disabled. He said his wife had serious back and spine problems that prevented her from walking long distances. He mentioned that his son was apparently allergic to sunlight or something equally ridiculous. I swear he even said something about a hamster with asthma, though that might have been my tired brain playing tricks on me. I just stood there and let him finish his entire dramatic monologue. When he was done, I walked back to my car, turned off the engine, and left it parked halfway into my spot. I was still blocking one car, but at this point I figured the owner could deal with it or come talk to me like a reasonable person. When I walked back to my apartment, I decided to post about the situation in our building's message group. It was an informal chat where neighbors shared information about maintenance issues, package deliveries, and general building news. I explained what had happened and asked if anyone knew these new tenants. Within an hour, I got a response from the sweetest elderly lady who lived on the second floor. She'd been in the building longer than anyone and kind of served as an unofficial building manager. Her message told me not to worry about the situation anymore because she had already taken care of everything. I wasn't sure what she meant by taking care of everything, but her tone suggested the problem was solved. The next morning, I saw the same family loading boxes into a moving truck. The son spotted me and quickly looked away, his face red with embarrassment. By afternoon, they were completely gone. Later that week, I ran into the sweet lady in the mailroom and thanked her for whatever she had done about the parking situation. She explained that it wasn't just about me. After she heard what happened, she went to talk to them about being respectful neighbors. She said the young man got very nasty with her, started yelling and using inappropriate language. So she simply told them that their lease wouldn't be renewed when it expired next month. I was shocked and asked if she could really do that. She smiled and revealed that she was actually the building owner, not just a tenant like I had always assumed. She explained that she didn't tolerate tenants who thought they could bully others or disrespect elderly residents. She winked and walked away, leaving me standing there with my mouth open. I'd always thought she was just a long-term tenant, not the actual owner. The housing shortage in our area meant that any apartment that became available got snapped up within days, so I knew she'd have no trouble finding new tenants. I still park in my assigned spot every day, and I've never had another problem. I bought my house after getting promoted to district manager at the hardware store chain where I work. It's a nice place, nothing fancy, but I've put a lot of work into it over the years. The backyard is my pride and joy. I spent 3 summers building a beautiful wooden fence around the perimeter and another 2 years getting the grass just right. My neighbors have always been pretty decent people. We wave at each other, help with packages when someone's out of town, that sort of thing. That all changed 6 months ago when Karen moved in next door with her teenage son. From day one, I could tell she was trouble. She parked her massive car halfway across my driveway the first week, then acted like I was being unreasonable when I asked her to move it. She let her dog run loose in my yard without asking, and when I mentioned it, she just shrugged and said, "Dogs need exercise." The real nightmare started 3 weeks ago when she bought her 16-year-old son his first car. It was this loud, souped-up muscle car that sounded like a jet engine. The kid clearly didn't know how to drive properly yet, but that didn't stop him from revving the engine every chance he got. The noise started at 7 in the morning and went on all day. The kid would sit in the driveway gunning the engine for 20 minutes at a time. When I worked from home, I couldn't even take client calls because of the racket. I tried talking to Karen about it first. I went over and politely asked if she could have her son keep the engine noise down during business hours since I sometimes work from home, and it was really disruptive. Karen just rolled her eyes and told me that boys will be boys, and that her son was just excited about his new car. She said I would get used to it eventually. I explained that this was a residential area with noise ordinances and asked if she could please have him practice somewhere else. Karen got defensive and told me that they pay their mortgage just like I do, and her son could rev his engine on their property whenever he wanted. I tried being patient. I really did. But after 2 weeks of this daily torture, I called the non-emergency police line to ask about noise complaints. They said they'd need evidence and suggested I document everything. So I started recording. I set up my phone to capture the daily engine revving sessions. I also installed a small security camera in my backyard that had a view of their driveway just in case things escalated. Yesterday morning, I was proven right to be prepared. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard the familiar sound of the car starting up, but this time, instead of just sitting in the driveway, I heard tires squealing. I looked out my window and saw something unbelievable. The kid had driven straight through my wooden fence and was doing donuts in my backyard. Actual spinning donuts, tearing up the grass I'd worked so hard to perfect and sending chunks of my fence flying everywhere. I ran outside immediately and yelled at him, asking what the hell he was doing and demanding that he get out of my yard right away. The kid just laughed and kept spinning the car around. He was clearly having the time of his life destroying my property. I could see Karen standing in her doorway watching the whole thing with her arms crossed. I shouted over to Karen to get her son out of my yard immediately. She called back that he was just having a little fun and told me not to be such a killjoy. I yelled back that this wasn't fun. He had just destroyed my fence and was ruining my lawn, and that this was criminal damage. Karen just shrugged and said it was just grass and that it would grow back. The kid finally stopped the car and rolled down his window. He apologized sarcastically, calling me old man, and then explained that his mom had told him I'd been complaining about his car too much. He said she told him to come give me something real to complain about. This wasn't some teenage prank gone wrong. Karen had actually sent her son to destroy my property as revenge for me, asking them to keep the noise down. I asked him if he was telling me that his mother had actually told him to do this. The kid confirmed that she had, saying she told him I needed to learn to mind my own business. Karen walked over with this smug smile on her face and told me that maybe next time I would think twice before calling the police about normal teenage behavior. I told her that what her son did wasn't normal and that she had sent him to destroy my fence and lawn just because I asked her to keep the noise down. Karen denied sending him anywhere and claimed he was just expressing himself. She said boys need to blow off steam. I told her she could explain that to the police because I had the whole thing on camera. Her smug expression faltered for just a second, but then she accused me of bluffing and said I couldn't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording I'd just taken of the whole incident. Then I walked over to my security camera and pointed it out. I told her I could actually prove everything because I had her son admitting she told him to do this, and I had video of him destroying my property. The kid suddenly looked a lot less confident and told his mom that she had said there wouldn't be any cameras. Karen told him to shut up and not say another word. But it was too late. I already had everything I needed on video. I called the police right there on the spot. When the officers arrived 20 minutes later, I showed them the footage. The kid admitted he didn't even have a driver's license yet. He'd just gotten his learner's permit the week before. The officer asked him to confirm that he had driven without a license, destroyed my fence, and damaged my lawn because his mother told him to. The kid tried to backtrack, saying she didn't exactly tell him to wreck the fence, but that she said he should go have some fun in my yard since I kept complaining about the noise. The officer turned to Karen and asked if that was accurate. Karen denied everything, claiming she never told him to do anything and that this was harassment. She insisted that I had been bothering them for weeks. The officer said they would need to see the security footage. I showed them the whole recording on my phone. Clear as day, you could hear the kid saying his mom told him to give me something real to complain about. They arrested both of them, Karen for conspiracy to commit criminal damage and her son for criminal damage, trespassing, and driving without a license. The car got impounded too. Karen was screaming about how this was all my fault and how I'd ruined her son's life over some stupid grass. The kid was crying and saying he was sorry, but it was way too late for apologies. My insurance adjuster came out this morning to assess the damage. Between the custom wooden fence and the landscaping work that got destroyed, they're looking at about $8,000 in damages. Karen's homeowner's insurance is going to have to cover it all, and her rates are going to skyrocket. I also found out from another neighbor that this isn't Karen's first run-in with the law. She's been evicted from 2 previous rental properties for similar incidents with neighbors. Some people never learn. The kid's court date is next month. Since he's a minor, he'll probably just get community service and have to wait longer to get his actual license. But Karen is facing potential jail time for conspiracy charges, plus she'll have to pay restitution for all the damage. I'm a college student who moved back home after my sophomore year to save money and help out my parents. My older sister just graduated with her bachelor's degree and also moved back home while job hunting. Our parents were really strict about keeping ourselves clean and looking presentable. They always said first impressions matter, and that taking care of yourself shows respect for others. My sister and I both learned these lessons well during high school. She was always put together, had great grades, and seemed like she had everything figured out. But something changed when she went away to college. I noticed it during winter breaks, but I thought it was just stress from finals or something temporary. She'd show up looking kinda messy, but I figured that's just how college students are sometimes. When she moved back home permanently 3 months ago, I realized this wasn't a phase. My sister had completely given up on basic hygiene. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks, always greasy and matted down. Her skin was oily and she smelled like she only showered once a week at most. Her fingernails were long and yellow from dirt buildup. Even her nice clothes looked wrinkled and sloppy because she wouldn't take care of them properly. The smell was really bad. I'm not usually sensitive to odors, but being in the same room as her would literally make me feel sick sometimes. I started avoiding common areas when she was around, which was hard since we live in the same house. Our parents tried talking to her about it gently at first. They would suggest she might want to freshen up before going out or offer to do her laundry, but she'd get defensive and accuse them of attacking her appearance. When they tried to explain that presentation matters for job interviews, she'd storm off and complain about how our family doesn't support her. That's when she started blaming everyone else for her problems. She'd been applying to jobs in her field for months with no success. Instead of considering that maybe her appearance was hurting her chances, she decided it was all because of sexism. According to her, every company in her industry was just a boys' club full of men who were intimidated by smart women. I tried to stay out of it at first. It wasn't my business if she wanted to live in denial, but then she started trying to drag me into her victim mentality. Last week, she came into my room while I was on a video call with my friends playing games. We were in the middle of a ranked match when she just barged in without knocking and started venting about her latest round of failed interviews. She launched into her usual rant about how the hiring manager seemed interested during the interview, but then went completely cold afterward. She claimed this always happens and that it's obvious these companies don't want to hire women. I told her I was kind of busy right now, but she ignored me. She kept going, insisting that companies probably see her qualifications and get threatened by them. I could hear my friends on the call starting to get uncomfortable. One of them muted his mic, probably cringing at the awkwardness. Then she told me I should be paying attention because I'll face the same thing when I graduate. She went on about how men in the workplace are selfish and will try to keep me down too. I asked if we could talk about this later since I was literally in the middle of something, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept lecturing me about the patriarchy holding her back and how she was just trying to warn me about what I'd face as a woman in the professional world. My male friends could hear everything through my headset, and I could tell they were getting annoyed. She insisted that most men are intimidated by competent women and will do whatever they can to sabotage them. That's when I snapped. I've been holding back for months, watching her blame everyone except herself for her problems. I was embarrassed that my friends were hearing this and I was tired of her making excuses. I told her the real reason she's not getting hired isn't because she's a woman or because men are intimidated by her. It's because she looks and smells like she hasn't showered in a month. The room went completely silent. Even my friends stopped talking on the call. I asked her if she was a company owner trying to impress clients and investors. Would she want someone representing her business who looks like they live on the street? Or would she hire someone who actually takes care of themselves and looks professional? My sister went bright red. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. I told her she can blame sexism all she wants, but the truth is, she's sabotaging herself. No one wants to work with someone who can't even manage basic hygiene. She finally found her voice and accused me of being just like everyone else in the family, claiming I don't support her at all. I explained that I'm telling her the truth because I do support her, but she refuses to listen to anyone who doesn't tell her what she wants to hear. She stormed out of my room and slammed the door so hard it shook the walls. I had to apologize to my friends and explain the situation, which was mortifying. That was a week ago, and she's barely spoken to me since. When she does acknowledge me, it's just one-word responses or angry looks. Usually we argue and then get over it pretty quickly, but this time feels different. The weird part is, I think my words might have actually gotten through to her. 2 days after our fight, I noticed she took a long shower and actually washed her hair. She's been making more of an effort with her appearance, though she's still giving me the silent treatment. Our parents heard about the argument from her, and they're split on whether I did the right thing. Mom thinks I was too harsh, but Dad said someone needed to give her a reality check. He thanked me for saying what they'd been trying to tell her for months. I don't regret what I said, even though it created this awkward tension in our house. Back in 2003, I was 22 and desperate for a real job after college. I've been working retail and food service for years, so when I landed an inside sales position at a major corporation, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and I finally had my own cubicle in a real office building. The sales team was pretty great. We were all young, hungry, and trying to prove ourselves. I made some genuine friendships there that lasted long after I left the company, but the middle management team was something else entirely. They seemed to have gotten their degrees from the school of making everyone's life miserable while contributing absolutely nothing useful. The office itself was straight out of the 90s with beige cubicles, fluorescent lighting, and that industrial carpet that looked like it could hide any stain. Each cubicle was basically a fabric-covered box with just enough room for a desk, computer, and maybe a small plant if you were lucky. Everything was going fine for my first few months. I was hitting my sales targets, getting along with my co-workers, and actually enjoying the work. Then one Monday morning, I walked into the office to find 3 yellow balloons tied to my cubicle wall. My co-worker in the next cube over looked just as confused as I felt. I asked him what was with the balloons, and he said he had no idea, but everyone had them. That's when one of the managers, let's call him Karen since he acted like one, came walking over with a clipboard and that smug smile managers get when they think they've had a brilliant idea. Karen told the team that we'd all noticed the new motivation system. He explained that each of us had 3 balloons, and every time we closed a sale, they'd pop one of our balloons. By the end of the week, everyone would be able to see who was meeting their goals and who needed to step up their game. I felt my stomach drop. This was basically a public shaming system disguised as motivation. I watched some of my quieter co-workers shift uncomfortably in their seats. I asked if that meant someone who didn't close any deals would just have their balloons stay up all week. Karen confirmed this with enthusiasm, saying it would encourage everyone to work harder. That first week was brutal. I managed to get all 3 of my balloons popped by Wednesday, but some of my co-workers weren't as lucky. I watched good salespeople who were just having an off-week walk past their desks with their heads down, clearly embarrassed by their remaining balloons. One woman who was normally chatty and confident became quiet and withdrawn. Another guy started coming in early and staying late, clearly stressed about his visible failure. By Friday, the office felt tense and miserable. The balloon system had turned us against each other instead of motivating anyone, but the managers seemed pleased with their innovation. Over the weekend, I kept thinking about how unfair and cruel the whole thing was. That's when I had an idea. Monday morning, I showed up to work with several packages of yellow balloons hidden in my bag. Sure enough, everyone had 3 fresh balloons tied to their cubicles again. I waited until Karen and the other managers disappeared into their morning meeting, then got to work. I started blowing up balloons and taping them everywhere in my cubicle. Along the walls, hanging from the ceiling, clustered in the corners. I must have blown up about 30 balloons. My entire workspace looked like a yellow balloon explosion. My co-workers started gathering around, laughing for the first time in a week. One of them asked what I was doing, and I told them I just really loved these yellow balloons and thought I'd bring some of my own to make my space more festive. Word spread quickly, and soon people were asking if I had extra balloons. I handed them out freely, and within an hour, half the sales floor was decorated with additional yellow balloons. People were laughing, joking, and having fun with it. That's when Karen came back from his meeting. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw my cubicle. Karen demanded to know what this was. I explained that these were my personal balloons, and that I had loved the yellow balloon idea so much that I brought my own from home. I asked if he didn't think they were great. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was clearly frustrated but couldn't figure out exactly what rule I was breaking. Karen pointed out that these weren't part of the motivation system. I agreed, explaining that they were just for decoration and that the 3 official balloons were right there. I pointed to the 3 regulation balloons that were barely visible among my sea of yellow. Karen walked away, but I could see him huddling with the other managers across the office. They kept looking over at my desk and whispering. I caught bits of their conversation about personal balloons and disrupting the system and insubordination. The balloon decorations changed the whole mood of the office. People were smiling again, joking around, and the oppressive atmosphere from the previous week had lifted completely. Around lunchtime, Karen came back to my desk with another manager. The second manager told me I needed to remove the extra balloons because they were disrupting their motivation system. I pointed out that they were my personal property and that I wasn't interfering with the 3 official balloons at all. Karen said this was ridiculous and that I was making a mockery of their program. I replied that I was just decorating my workspace with balloons I bought myself, and I thought the company loved the balloon idea. They walked away again, clearly agitated. But about an hour later, I watched Karen walk over to my cubicle with a pen in his hand. Without saying a word, he started popping my personal balloons. I asked him what he was doing as he continued popping them. Karen said the balloons were disruptive. I told him those were my personal belongings and that he couldn't just destroy my property. Karen dismissed this, saying they were just balloons. He popped 3 more and walked away with a satisfied smirk. That's when I decided to make a phone call. I dialed the Human Resources extension. When the HR representative answered, I told them I needed to file a complaint about destruction of personal property. I explained that my manager had just deliberately destroyed items that belonged to me. They asked what kind of property, and I told them balloons. I had brought personal balloons to decorate my workspace, and my manager came over and popped them without permission. There was a pause before they repeated the word balloons as a question. I confirmed that yes, they were my personal property and he had no right to destroy them. I pointed out that in any other context, this would be considered vandalism. Working for a large corporation means they take everything seriously when it comes to potential liability. Within an hour, someone from HR was at my desk taking photos of the popped balloon remnants and getting a written statement from me. By Tuesday, all the balloons were gone, not just mine but everyone's. The entire motivation system had been quietly discontinued. My co-worker leaned over the cubicle wall and asked if I had really called HR about balloons. I told him they had destroyed my personal property and I just wanted to make sure it was properly documented. The managers avoided me for the rest of my time at that company, which was honestly a blessing. The oppressive balloon system never returned, and the office went back to being a normal workplace where people weren't publicly shamed for having a slow week. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.